Weather's a bit changeable today. I was hoping to do some welding, but I think it's going to rain. So instead, I'm going to do something that is perhaps frivolous, which is make a trim panel for the boot. I want to get all these wires hidden away and safe. I haven't had any problems with them over the years, but you know, the longer you go without them, the more you risk it. Made a start on the centre panel. We're going to keep everything nice and simple here. I'm using some leftover cardboard box, and I've just got to work out where this piece is, and that means once I've put my rectangle in, I've just pressed it against the latch, which has given me an imprint. I can then cut straight down. We can trim this open. I don't want to cover this up with the trim panel. I actually want this proud of it because I know from adjusting it in the past it can be a bit of a nuisance to get everything lined up properly. So if I just go around where the latch is, that will be perfectly fine for me. With that roughly trimmed, what I can do now is press down here where I can see the bolts are for the latch, and that will tell me where to trim that. This panel here comes up and then it has a bend in it, which I'm going to have to replicate in this piece. Shouldn't be too difficult. And then of course once we've folded that, I'll need to trim the top. So I've got just a couple of little dimples there, which I'm going to notch out. And that should be good for that. You can see it's just there. It's fiddly, this sort of work. Might not actually have to trim the top of this very much, which is good. So I can see the fold wants to be in line with the bottom of these notches I've put in for the bolt holes. That might be a little tricky to do. The final panel won't be made in cardboard. I'll be making it in some aluminium. I've put a score through with the Stanley blade and used one of my roof rack bars as a nice straight line for that. Just peeled off the boot seal, and that will allow me to draw the actual lip of the boot on the cardboard so I can see where to cut. I'm not putting a lip on the bottom where it meets the floor. I don't need to, because I'm going to actually screw this or use poppers or something like that just to hold this onto the metal on the back of the car, and that will be fine. So there's my line, and I'm actually going to bring this down a little bit because I don't want it tucked underneath this. Again, it's all down to thicknesses of materials, and the boot seal will probably go over it, but if it doesn't have to, then that's better. Boot seal back on, trim in, and the one thing I am going to change is just the shape round here. I think it's a bit needlessly complicated, so I should just trim it back in a square, and that will be fine. It's tidy enough. The whole goal here is to hide the wires. So we'll tidy that up, and then we'll move on to doing the covers for these. Now, I was going originally to do a nice curved piece, but I don't think it's necessary. I think I can just make boxes. I've got plenty of space here, so if I just follow the line basically of the boot seal, I can bring it down to the floor, across the top to the inner wing, and then just make sure it comes out far enough that we're not squashing any wires, because these do have little pigtails from the bulb holders. So I've got to come out at least as far as this to protect all that, and it shouldn't foul the filler pipe cover there, we should be able to just go straight through. This side is slightly complicated because I've got the high level brake light wiring there, and this wire could do with being a couple of inches longer, ideally. So we'll have to have a think about that one. I might just put a new wire in that's just longer. That's probably the easiest solution. But the box on this side should be the same sort of deal. I should be able to just box straight to the back end. It's not going to foul the spare wheel here, and that will tidy everything up in there. We're getting there. You sort of have to put the piece in, loosely trim it where you want it, scribe it as best you can, which is where you sort of try and follow the line of the shape that you've got, and then cut a bit away and refit. I'm as far as having to cut a bit away here because I want this to suck back against the bodywork a bit better. I've probably got to add a little bit down here and a bit more on here, just because the piece of cardboard I was using wasn't quite big enough. I'd like to make these in one piece if I can, and then I can just fold and rivet on the corners, which would be great. The only thing is, it's a bit chunky, so it's not the prettiest thing, but I think I'm just going to have to live with that. Now that I've actually got everything all Now that I've got everything all mocked up and in place, it doesn't look quite as bulky as it did. I don't mind this as much, and it does protect everything, keep it all tidied. I'm not going to put a curve on this corner. I have thought about it, but I think it's more work for no real gain, and I suspect this will actually be quite handy, because you'll be able to put a cup of tea or something on there. The pattern should fit this side. They're the same side to side on the car. To double check that, I will turn this one inside out and do it on that side. And I've just got to hope I've got enough aluminium to do this. I think I have. I do need some way to secure this down, and I'm considering putting a vertical sort of lip up here and attaching it to this somehow. I just haven't decided how I'm going to do that yet, because the trouble is, this up here is just the single skin, so if I put any fixings through that, you're going to see it on the outside of the car, which I don't really want. I could weld a bolt on here, so you've got a captive bolt that you put through the cover and then you put a wing nut on. For the bottom, that's a lot easier. All I need to do here is put some tabs out and then you just screw it into the boot floor, so that's a lot easier. The only other issue is to get into the tool tray, you would need to remove this cover. So as long as I make these easy to remove, we should be okay. I don't really use the tool tray anyway because it has a habit of filling up with moisture, which isn't ideal. Yeah, let's just flip this one inside out and try it on that side. Just double check everything fits properly. Sometimes there's small differences. It should be fine. That fits in that side just fine. Clears the spare tyre. When you actually take the spare tyre out, it folds this way and out through the middle, so it's not making it any more difficult to get that out than it was. And it just fills in an awkward corner in the boot there. Yeah, I think these will work. I'm going to cut these out of some aluminium now. See if I can do them in one piece, that would be nice. If not, I'll do them in sections. We'll add some little tabs and then I'll rivet them together. I'll see what materials I've got and we'll go from there. I've been hanging on to this boot lid outer skin because I knew it was going to be useful for something, I just didn't know quite what. And now I do. I have mocked up these panels. I can make them in one piece, and it's just enough to actually make it out of this. The only difficulty I'm going to have is I have to cut it out and then flatten everything, so that's probably going to change the shape a little bit. But we'll we'll see what we can do here. First job is to mark everything out. Wow, that's actually a lot more curved. First job might be to try and flatten this out a bit. Got all the panels as cleaned up as they need to be for our next stage. Wasn't too bad stripping the paint off, but the temperature has meant that my batteries have been dying a bit quicker than usual. I didn't need to take off every single scrap of paint, just enough to give us a surface for the glue to stick to. Next thing I've done is I've marked out my fold lines according to my pattern. Same on this one, and I've just followed my cardboard patterns exactly, and I will remember to turn this one round because these two need to be mirrored, and currently they are the same way round, just for framing it in short. I'm not sure exactly how I'm going to do these folds. I don't have a brake, so we'll see what I can do with a hammer and maybe some bits of wood. Got these all folded up. I forgot how easy aluminium actually is to bend, so with a batten of wood I'm mostly just pushing on it with my hands. I got the shape, and it's given me this nice slightly rounded curve, except for on this seam here obviously. This panel has a very slight bend in it. I'm going to test fit this in the car first. I think I've got it about right, but it might need a little bit of a tweak. I'll test fit it before I put the fabrics on. And the next thing I need to make is some strips for the boxes. And I'm going to use this line here, where the wood used to be on the inside of this boot frame, as my guide. I'm just going to chop that off and drill some holes in it, and that will give me what I need for holding this seam together. Now, although the metal is holding itself quite nicely, I just want some reinforcements, so I'm going to put an L bracket here and here and just rivet that in place. That will keep that nice and strong, and the carpet that I put on this will cover all of that up. I've made my little brackets. I drilled the holes first and then cut the strips out. That made it a lot easier. And then we offer those up to the panel using a marker pen. You go through the hole, and that marks this piece for you, so you can drill your holes and everything lines up. Because everything's aluminium, I don't need to worry about galvanic corrosion or dissimilar corrosion. I can just rivet everything together. Just using these standard little pop rivets. I had exactly 8 of this size, so let's hope we don't make any mistakes. There we go, that's the first one. Do the same on this bracket. We'll try that again. Now I've got the remnants of the old rivet out from that first one. Right, now we've got these two done. On the outside you have the nice smooth one. That's kind of important because I want to make sure this is as smooth as it can be when I put the carpet on. There's a little bit of spring to the panel at the moment, so you do just have to make sure everything is together.
last one. Which I'm a little bit misaligned. Go. And we're all together. I'm going to use some duct tape. I'm just going to bind the edges. Nice, quick, easy solution, and it'll be hard wearing enough for this particular area. The other thing I've done is I've used it on the corner where we have the brackets, because the carpet might not meet up perfectly here when I put it on. So this will be very good at hiding that fact, because this is black and of course the carpet's black as well. I've already taped over the old boot hinge holes. I didn't have any intention of filling them in, but I thought if I tape them over there's less chance of anything going through there. And now we'll just work around and get these edges bound. As you go, when you do any of these edges, because they're not all straight, they're all a little bit curved here and there, push it down onto the edge of the metal and then fold it over and just work your way along gradually. You'll get some wrinkles on the inside, but that's not a problem. You're not going to see that when this is all done. What it does mean is you don't end up with any kind of baggy bits on this edge. But you will get, where there's curves, some sort of pleating and this sort of business, which is fine. It's not going to cause you any problems. The important thing is this edge now is completely blunt. After just a few minutes, you end up with something a little bit like this. Before I put the carpet on, I need to paint the inside of these. Now, I don't think it's going to be an issue. I don't think these are going to touch any of the wiring connectors or cause any problems. But again, like the tape, it's better to do more prevention than less. And all I'm going to do with these is just spray the inside of them and the back of this centre panel in just some generic paint. And when that's dried, we can glue the carpet on, and then these are almost ready to go in the car. I have figured out how I'm actually going to fit them, and I really hope it works, because if it does, it's really, really easy. Paint's all dried on these, and I think they look pretty good for what's going to be the inside. Now it's time to do the carpeting on the outside. It just so happens I have some of this left over from when I did the headlining on the Maestro. There'll be a link up in the top corner there, and probably one in the description for if you want to know how to do a headlining. Very easy, just spray it on both sides, wait a couple of seconds and then stick it together. But you kind of only get one shot. I've been a little bit busy with my solution, which is good old Velcro. Because I've always got, you know, haberdashery stuff in stock because of the sewing. And I can't really drill holes through any of this. And I didn't want to make it permanent. I want these covers to be removable because obviously I might want to change a bulb or get to the wiring for some reason. So they can't be permanently fixed in. And I realised that Velcro is probably the sensible solution. It's how the carpet trims on the side are held in on the Maestro, so it's not like it's not unheard of for a car manufacturer to do that. I thought it made sense here. The other thing, I needed a very thin strip of black material up here to hide the beige paint, and I realised that the gaffer tape, the duct tape, is the perfect thing. It's just about the right thickness and it goes in there lovely. So that will hide this tiny gap, looks like a finger's width, between the boot seal and the trim. In theory, all I have to do is peel the paper backing off the Velcro because they're sticky backed and press the trim in place, and that should hold it down. In practice, we'll see. Well, that's worked. It's not a perfect solution, but it certainly looks a lot tidier than it did. I haven't got all the wires all exposed anymore. And although the duct tape covers most of the beige, there are a few little spots here and there where it's showing through, but that's a job for another day. I'm not worrying about that today. I'm happy enough that this is in. The only problem I have is on this side, and that's the this wire here is for the high level brake light, and it's just a tiny bit too short to go underneath this box when it's pressed in, and I haven't got any wire that gauge to extend that with, but that is a job I shall do. All I have to do for the moment is just leave this cover loose and that will be fine. But other than that, it actually went very, very smoothly. I am eventually going to paint the inside of the wings here in black. I'll do the same with the archers, and I'm probably going to put a trim board on the back panel here as well, just to tidy everything up a bit. Address these little bits of surface rust from when water was getting into the boot. A problem it's had on and off all the time I've owned it. Yeah, I'm happy enough with that. I think that looks quite smart and a lot better than it did.
Sometimes it's just about a little bit of thinking when you're trying to solve a problem. And I found with this wire here for the high level brake light, instead of running it down onto the floor as it used to be, if I push it up against the inner wing, when the trim goes in, pushes the wire aside but doesn't disconnect it and doesn't stretch anything. And that means I don't have to extend that bit of wire. What I think I will do is just put a little bit of tape on here to keep the wire to one side, and then I can slide the trim back in on top. I just have to remember this trim slides in, notches where the centre trim is there, and then we just engage it with the Velcro, and that is nice and tidy.